The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when I cast my first line into Miller's Pond. Just another day of fishing, or so I thought. Little did I know, my life was about to change forever. I'm Tom, a simple man with simple pleasures. Fishing has always been my escape, my way to forget about the world and its troubles. But on that fateful morning, trouble found me. As I sat there, waiting for a bite, the mist hung heavy over the water. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and pine. Suddenly, I heard it, a splash, followed by a desperate cry. My heart raced as I sprinted towards the sound. There, thrashing in the murky water, was a small boy. Without thinking, I dove in. The water was ice cold, shocking my system, but adrenaline took over as I swam towards the child. His eyes were wide with terror, his little arms flailing wildly. I reached him just as he was going under. Grabbing him, I pulled with all my might, fighting against the pond's surprising pull. It felt like an eternity before we broke the surface, both of us gasping for air. As I dragged us both to shore, relief washed over me. The boy was safe. But then, as I looked down at him, something caught my eye. A glint of gold against his pale skin. With trembling fingers, I pushed aside his soaked shirt. There, hanging from a delicate chain, was a pendant. My breath caught in my throat. It couldn't be, but it was. The very same pendant I had lost 25 years ago, the night my little brother disappeared. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, what's the story behind this pendant? And how did it end up around this boy's neck? Well, stick around, because things are about to get a whole lot stranger. My hands shook as I stared at the pendant. Memories flooded back, threatening to drown me just like the pond nearly did to this boy. Mister? The kid's voice snapped me back to reality. Are you okay? I looked into his eyes, bright blue, just like my brother's. I'm fine, I lied. What's your name, son? Jake, he replied, shivering. I quickly wrapped him in my jacket. Jake, where did you get this pendant? He touched it gently. It's always been mine. Mom says it's special. My mind raced. Could it be? After all these years? I helped Jake to his feet. We need to get you home. Where do you live? Just over the hill, he pointed. In the old Miller house. My heart skipped a beat. The Miller house had been abandoned for years. At least, that's what everyone in town believed. As we walked, I couldn't help but ask, Jake, how old are you? 10, he answered proudly. 10. The exact age my brother would have been when he vanished. We crested the hill, and there it was, the Miller house. But instead of the dilapidated structure I expected, it stood pristine, as if plucked from my childhood memories. A woman burst out the front door, her face a mix of relief and fear. Jake, she cried, rushing towards us. But as she got closer, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. I knew that face. Older, yes, but unmistakable. It was Sarah, my childhood sweetheart, who had disappeared the same night as my brother. She froze when she saw me, her eyes widening in recognition. Tom, she whispered, her voice trembling. In that moment, I knew. The pendant, the boy, Sarah. They were all pieces of a puzzle I thought I'd never solve. But as the saying goes, be careful what you wish for. Because sometimes, the truth is far more terrifying than the mystery. And folks, let me tell you, what I was about to uncover would shake our little town to its very core. Sarah's eyes darted between Jake and me, panic etched across her face. Jake, go inside, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The boy hesitated, looking at me with curiosity. I gave him a reassuring nod, and he reluctantly headed towards the house. As soon as Jake was out of earshot, Sarah grabbed my arm. Tom, you can't be here. You need to leave. Now. But I stood my ground. Sarah, what's going on? That pendant. Jake, he's my brother's son, isn't he? She flinched at my words, confirming my suspicion. It's not that simple, Tom. There's so much you don't understand. Then help me understand, I pleaded. I've spent 25 years wondering what happened that night. I deserve answers. Sarah's shoulders sagged, defeat written all over her. Fine, but not here. Meet me at the old treehouse tonight at midnight. Come alone. I nodded. my mind reeling. As I turned to leave, Sarah called out, "Tom, be careful. They might be watching." A chill ran down my spine. "Who's watching, Sarah?" She shook her head, fear clouding her eyes. "I've already said too much. Just watch your back." I walked away from the Miller house, my head spinning with questions. Who were they? Why had Sarah and my brother disappeared? And most importantly, what danger was Jake in? As I made my way back to town, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Shadows seemed to move at the corner of my vision, and every snapping twig made me jump. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions of my routine while my mind raced with possibilities. As night fell, I prepared for my midnight rendezvous, arming myself with a flashlight and a pocket knife, just in case. The old treehouse loomed before me, a relic of happier times. As I climbed up, my heart pounded so loud I was sure it would give me away. Sarah was already there, her face pale in the moonlight. "Tom," she breathed, "there's something you need to know about this town. About that night. About your brother." She took a deep breath, and what she said next turned my world upside down. "Your brother didn't just disappear, Tom. He was taken. And if we're not careful, they'll take Jake too." The floorboards creaked behind me. I whirled around, my blood turning to ice as I saw a figure emerge from the shadows. "I'm afraid," a familiar voice said. "It's already too late for that." My heart nearly stopped as the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was Sheriff Dawson, the man who had led the search for my brother all those years ago. "Evening, Tom." "Sarah," he nodded, his voice eerily calm. "Lovely night for a reunion, isn't it?" Sarah's face drained of color. "How did you find us?" The sheriff chuckled, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, Sarah, did you really think we'd ever let you out of our sight?" I stepped between them, my mind racing. "What's going on here, Sheriff? What do you mean by a we?" Dawson's eyes gleamed with an unnatural light. "You always were a curious one, Tom, just like your brother. It's what got him into trouble in the first place." "Where is he?" I demanded, my fists clenching at my sides. "Safe," Dawson replied, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Just like Jake will be." Sarah let out a strangled cry. "No, you can't take him." The sheriff's face hardened. "We had a deal, Sarah. 25 years of freedom in exchange for the boy when the time came." My head was spinning. "What deal? What are you talking about?" Suddenly, a piercing scream cut through the night. It was coming from the direction of the Miller house. "Jake!" Sarah cried, pushing past me and scrambling down the treehouse ladder. I moved to follow, but Dawson's hand clamped down on my shoulder with inhuman strength. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Tom." In that moment, something inside me snapped. All the years of pain, confusion, and loss boiled over. I whirled around, my fist connecting with Dawson's jaw. To my shock, he barely flinched. Instead, his skin seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a pebble. "Oh, Tom," he sighed, his voice distorting. "You really shouldn't have done that." As I watched in horror, Sheriff Dawson's features began to melt away, revealing something otherworldly beneath. I stumbled backward, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare. But as the creature that used to be Sheriff Dawson advanced on me, I realized with terrifying clarity that this was all too real. And if I didn't find a way out of this treehouse fast, I might never uncover the truth about my brother, Jake, or the dark secret that had been lurking in our town for the past 25 years. With my heart pounding in my ears, I made a split-second decision. It was time to fight or flight, and in that moment, flight seemed like the only option that might keep me alive long enough to save Jake and unravel this mystery. Little did I know, my leap from that treehouse was just the beginning of a night that would challenge everything I thought I knew about my town, my family, and the nature of reality itself. I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my ankle, but adrenaline kicked in, numbing the ache as I scrambled to my feet. Behind me, I heard an inhuman screech that made my blood run cold. I ran, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face. The forest I'd known all my life suddenly felt alien and hostile. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and every rustle of leaves sounded like pursuing footsteps. My mind raced faster than my feet. What was that thing in the treehouse? What did it want with Jake? And most importantly, how was I going to stop it? I burst out of the tree line, the Miller house looming ahead. A car engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness. I caught a glimpse of Sarah behind the wheel, her face a mask of terror. In the back seat, Jake's small form was slumped against the window. "Sarah!" I yelled, waving my arms. "Wait!" But the car peeled away, tires kicking up gravel. I was alone. Or so I thought. A low growl came from behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. There, at the edge of the forest, stood Sheriff Dawson, or what used to be him. In the moonlight, I could see his skin rippling and shifting, like something was trying to break free from within. "You can't run, Tom," it said, its voice a guttural parody of the sheriff's familiar drawl. "You're part of this now, whether you like it or not." I backed away slowly, my mind frantically searching for a way out. That's when I spotted it, my old pickup truck, parked where I'd left it earlier that day. "What are you?" I asked, trying to keep its attention as I inched towards the truck. It laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "We are the guardians, the keepers of the balance. Your brother discovered us, and now, so have you." I reached the truck, my hand finding the door handle. "What do you want with Jake?" "The boy is special," it growled, advancing slowly, "just like your brother was. They have potential." In one fluid motion, I yanked the door open and threw myself inside, fumbling for the keys I always left in the ignition. The engine roared to life just as the creature lunged. I stomped on the gas, tires spinning in the dirt. The thing that was once Sheriff Dawson clung to the hood, its face pressing against the windshield. Its features were melting, reforming into something impossible. I swerved hard, and it flew off, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. But as I sped away, I could see it in my rearview mirror, already getting to its feet. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel as I raced down the dark country roads. I had no idea where Sarah had taken Jake, but I knew I had to find them, because now I understood this wasn't just about my brother anymore. Something dark and ancient was stirring in our little town, and somehow, Jake was at the center of it all. As the miles flew by, one thought kept repeating in my mind. Nothing would ever be the same again. And if I wanted to survive this night, I'd have to be ready for anything. The headlights of my pickup cut through the darkness as I sped down the winding country roads. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything that had happened. Where would Sarah take Jake? And more importantly, what were they running from? As if in answer to my thoughts, my old CB radio crackled to life. I'd installed it years ago for fishing trips, but I'd never expected to hear a voice come through it now. "Tom? Tom, are you there?" It was Sarah, her voice tight with fear. I snatched up the receiver. "Sarah, where are you? Is Jake okay?" "We're heading for the old mining tunnels," she replied, her voice breaking up with static. "It's the only place they can't follow. Tom, you need to listen carefully. Everything you thought you knew about this town, about your brother, it's all a lie." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "What do you mean?" "Your brother didn't just disappear," Sarah continued. "He discovered something. Something that's been hidden in this town for centuries. A gateway dash." Suddenly, her voice cut out, replaced by a harsh, inhuman screech that made me nearly drive off the road. "Sarah!" I yelled into the receiver. "Sarah, can you hear me?" Nothing but static answered me. I slammed my hand against the dashboard in frustration. The mining tunnels, I knew where they were. Old remnants from the gold rush days, they honeycombed the hills outside of town. But why would Sarah think they'd be safe there? As I turned onto the old logging road that led to the mines, movement in my rearview mirror caught my eye. Headlights, and they were gaining fast. My blood ran cold as I recognized the vehicle. Sheriff Dawson's patrol car. But I knew it wasn't the sheriff behind the wheel. Not anymore. I floored the accelerator, my old pickup groaning in protest as I pushed it to its limits. The patrol car was faster, though, and it was closing the gap. Just as it was about to ram me, I saw the turnoff for the mines. I jerked the wheel hard, skidding onto the dirt road in a cloud of dust. The patrol car overshot, giving me a few precious seconds of lead. I could see the entrance to the main tunnel now, a gaping maw of darkness in the hillside. As I screeched to a halt, I saw Sarah's car parked haphazardly near the entrance. But Sarah and Jake were nowhere in sight. I leaped out of the truck, the sound of the approaching patrol car growing louder by the second. There was no time to hesitate. Taking a deep breath, I plunged into the darkness of the tunnel. The air was cool and damp, thick with the smell of earth and decay. My flashlight cast eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls. "Sarah," I called out. "Jake." My voice echoed back at me, mocking and hollow. But then, faintly, I heard something. A child's whimper, coming from deeper in the tunnel. I pressed on, my heart pounding. Whatever secrets these tunnels held, whatever truth Sarah was about to reveal, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same after tonight. And as I ventured deeper into the earth, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something far bigger and more terrifying than I could possibly imagine. The darkness of the tunnel seemed to press in on me from all sides as I moved deeper into the earth. My flashlight beam danced erratically across the rough walls, creating grotesque shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. "Sarah, Jake," I called out again, my voice bouncing back at me in a disorienting echo. Suddenly, a hand grabbed my arm, yanking me into a side passage. I nearly cried out, but a familiar voice hissed, "Quiet! They'll hear you." It was Sarah, her face pale and drawn in the dim light of my flashlight. Jake huddled behind her, his eyes wide with fear. "Tom," Sarah whispered urgently, "we don't have much time. They're coming." "Who's coming?" I demanded. "Sarah, what the hell is going on?" She took a deep breath. "It's not a who, Tom. It's a what. They're not from here. Not from anywhere on Earth." I stared at her, struggling to comprehend. "What are you talking about?" 25 years ago, your brother and I stumbled upon something in these tunnels," Sarah explained, her voice trembling. "A portal, a gateway to somewhere else. The beings on the other side. They've been influencing our town for centuries, feeding off our energy, our lives." I shook my head in disbelief. "This is insane, Sarah. You're talking about aliens?" "Interdimensional beings," she corrected. "Your brother, he had a gift. He could sense them, communicate with them. They wanted him. When we refused, they took him." A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the thing that used to be Sheriff Dawson. "And Jake? Does he have this gift too?" Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. "That's why we have to protect him. Why we have to close the portal for good." Before I could respond, a low rumble echoed through the tunnel. The ground beneath our feet began to tremble. "They're here," Sarah whispered, terror etched across her face. Jake whimpered, clinging to his mother. I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, even as my own heart raced with fear. "What do we do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah's eyes hardened with determination. "We fight. We close the portal. And we end this, once and for all." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a strange device, unlike anything I'd ever seen. It pulsed with an otherworldly light. "Your brother made this," she explained. "It can seal the gateway, but we have to get close enough to use it." The rumbling grew louder. In the distance, I could hear the sound of inhuman screeches echoing through the tunnels. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Lead the way," I said to Sarah. As we moved deeper into the twisting passages, Jake between us, I couldn't help but feel like we were descending into the very heart of a nightmare. Whatever waited for us at the end of this dark journey, I knew our lives would never be the same. The fate of our town, maybe even our world, rested in our hands. And as the sounds of our pursuers grew closer, I silently prayed we were up to the challenge that lay ahead. The deeper we went into the tunnels, the more the air seemed to thicken with an otherworldly energy. My skin prickled with goosebumps, and every breath felt like drawing in syrup. Jake whimpered softly, and I gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "We're close," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with tension. As we rounded a corner, I saw it. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, and at its center was something. It defied description, a shimmering, twisting anomaly in the air itself. Colors that shouldn't exist danced across its surface, and looking at it for too long made my head spin. The gateway, Sarah breathed. But we weren't alone. Surrounding the portal were figures, if you could call them that. They shifted and changed as I watched, sometimes appearing human-like, other times taking on forms that my mind refused to comprehend. And they were all looking at us. Well, well, a familiar voice drawled. Sheriff Dawson, or what was left of him, stepped forward. The prodigal family returns. Stay back, I warned, pushing Jake behind me. The thing wearing Dawson's face laughed. Or what, Tom? You're out of your depth here. But don't worry, we'll take good care of Jake. Just like we did with your brother. Where is he? I demanded. What have you done with him? The creature's grin widened impossibly. Why don't you ask him yourself? From the writhing mass of entities, a figure emerged. My heart stopped. It was my brother, but not as I remembered him. He was older, changed. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his movements were too fluid, too perfect to be human. Hello, Tom, he said, his voice echoing strangely. It's been a while. What are you? I managed to choke out. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. I'm evolved, Tom. These beings, they've shown me things you couldn't imagine. And now, it's Jake's turn. No, Sarah cried, clutching Jake closer. My brother's face hardened. You can't stop this, Sarah. It's his destiny. Our destiny. I felt something snap inside me. This thing wasn't my brother anymore. Whatever he had become, whatever these creatures were, they had to be stopped. I turned to Sarah. The device. Now. She fumbled in her pocket, pulling out the strange contraption. But before she could activate it, one of the creatures lashed out, knocking it from her hand. Time seemed to slow down. I dove for the device, my fingers closing around it just as one of the entities reached for Jake. No, I roared, slamming my hand down on what I hoped was the activation button. The cavern erupted in blinding light. The creatures shrieked, a sound that threatened to shatter my eardrums. The gateway pulsed, contorting wildly, and then everything went silent. As the light faded, I blinked, trying to clear my vision. The creatures were gone. The gateway was different, smaller, unstable. You've wounded it, my brother's voice came, filled with rage. But you can't destroy it. We will return. With a final, piercing screech, he and the remaining entities were sucked into the collapsing portal. And then it was gone. We stood in stunned silence, the cavern now eerily quiet. Sarah hugged Jake tightly, tears streaming down her face. I looked at the device in my hand, now dark and lifeless. Is it over? I asked, my voice hoarse. Sarah shook her head slowly. No, she whispered. I think it's only just beginning. As we made our way back through the tunnels, towards the world above, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was right. We had won a battle, but the war was far from over. And somewhere out there, in the vast unknown, my brother was waiting. Changed, corrupted, but still my brother. Somehow, someway, I would find a way to save him. But for now, as we emerged into the cool night air, I knew one thing for certain. Our little town would never be the same again. And neither would I. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon as we emerged from the mine, casting long shadows across the landscape. The world looked the same, but everything had changed. Sarah, Jake, and I stood there for a moment, letting the cool morning air wash over us. We were alive, but the weight of what we'd experienced hung heavy on our shoulders. What now? I asked, breaking the silence. Sarah sighed, running a hand through her disheveled hair. We need to go somewhere safe. There might be more of them out there, and they'll be looking for us. I nodded, my mind racing. I know a place. My old hunting cabin, deep in the woods. Nobody knows about it except me. As we drove through the awakening town, everything seemed surreal. People were going about their morning routines, oblivious to the cosmic horror that had unfolded beneath their feet. At the cabin, we finally had a moment to breathe. As Sarah got Jake settled, I sat on the porch, trying to process everything. Tom, Sarah's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She sat down beside me, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. There's more you need to know, she said softly. About your brother, about Jake, about everything. I steeled myself. I'm listening. Sarah took a deep breath. Your family. You're not like the rest of us. You have a connection to the other side, a sensitivity to the beings that live there. Your brother discovered it by accident, and they were drawn to him like moths to a flame. And Jake? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He has it too. Stronger than your brother, even. That's why they want him so badly. I ran a hand over my face, feeling the weight of this revelation. So what do we do? How do we protect him? Sarah pulled out a worn journal from her bag. Your brother left this behind. It's full of information about the other side, about the beings that live there. He was working on a way to close the portals permanently. As she handed me the journal, a photo slipped out. It was of my brother, but he looked different. Older, but not in the twisted way I'd seen him in the cavern. This was him as he should have been. He's still in there, Tom, Sarah said gently, somewhere beneath whatever they've done to him. And I think you might be the key to saving him. I looked at her, a spark of hope igniting in my chest. How? Your connection. If we can strengthen it, learn to control it, we might be able to reach him. But it's dangerous. The same power that could save him could also make you a target. I stood up, a new determination filling me. I don't care about the risk. He's my brother. I have to try. Sarah nodded, a small smile on her face. I knew you'd say that. We'll start training tomorrow. For now, get some rest. We've got a long road ahead of us. As I headed inside, I caught a glimpse of Jake sleeping peacefully. I made a silent vow to protect him, to give him the childhood that had been stolen from my brother. Settling into bed, I opened my brother's journal. The first page held a message that sent a chill down my spine. To whoever finds this, the war has already begun. The fate of two worlds rests in your hands. Trust no one. And whatever you do, don't let them win. As sleep finally claimed me, I knew that this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come, and I had to be ready. For Jake, for my brother, and for the entire world that unknowingly stood on the brink of cosmic chaos. Days turned into weeks at the cabin as we settled into a new routine. Sarah began teaching me how to harness my latent abilities, using techniques detailed in my brother's journal. It was frustrating, exhausting work, but slowly, I began to sense things I'd never noticed before: whispers on the wind, shadows that moved against the current, the faint pulse of energy beneath our feet. Jake, too, was learning. His power grew stronger each day, and I often caught him staring into space, seeing things invisible to the rest of us. It was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. One crisp autumn morning, as mist clung to the trees surrounding our hideout, everything changed again. I was chopping wood when a familiar voice called out, "Hello, little brother." I spun around, axe raised, to find my brother standing at the edge of the clearing. But he wasn't the twisted creature I'd seen in the cavern. He looked normal, tired, older, but human. "How?" I began, but he cut me off. "I don't have much time," he said urgently. "They don't know I'm here. Listen carefully. What you did at the mine, it weakened them, but it won't last. They're regrouping, planning something big." I took a step towards him. "Come with us. We can protect you." He shook his head sadly. "It's too late for me, Tom. But Jake, you have to keep him safe. He's the key to all of this." "The key to what?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. My brother's form began to flicker, like a bad TV signal. "To closing the gates permanently. To ending this war once and for all. But he needs to be ready. You need to be ready." "How?" I pleaded. "Tell me what to do." His image was fading fast. The journal, the last pages, the answers. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the misty clearing. I raced back to the cabin, bursting through the door. Sarah jumped to her feet, alarm on her face. "What is it? What's wrong?" Breathlessly, I recounted my encounter. Sarah's eyes widened as I spoke, and she quickly retrieved the journal. Together, we pored over the final pages, which had seemed blank before. But now, Whether due to my growing abilities or some other force, I could see intricate diagrams and dense text appearing before my eyes. It's a map, Sarah breathed. A map to all the gateways. And here, instructions for a ritual that could seal them forever. Jake appeared in the doorway, his young face serious beyond his years. "We have to do it," he said simply. "It's why I'm here." I knelt before him, placing my hands on his shoulders. "Jake, this will be dangerous. We don't have to." He cut me off with a smile that reminded me so much of my brother. "We do, Uncle Tom. It's okay. I'm not scared." Looking into his eyes, I saw the truth of it. This boy, this incredible child, was ready to face whatever came next. I stood, a new resolve filling me. "All right then, where do we start?" Sarah pointed to a location on the map. "Here, the strongest gateway. If we can close this one, the others will follow," I finished. As we began to pack, preparing for the journey and battles that lay ahead, I felt a strange mix of fear and hope. We were three unlikely heroes: a fisherman turned interdimensional warrior, a woman who'd spent half her life in hiding, and a boy with the power to reshape reality. But together, we just might have a chance to save not just our world, but countless others. As we loaded up the car, I took one last look at the cabin that had been our sanctuary. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same. But I was ready. We were ready. The war for reality itself was about to begin, and we were the last line of defense. I started the engine, and we set off into the unknown, the first page of a new chapter in a story much bigger than ourselves.